how do you know the Crowley family?
Well, my name is Kristen Melissa, and I am Karen Crowley's youngest sister. And so I am Tim Crowley, David Crowley's uncle's, sister. So I'm in the extended family. And my husband and family, we all lived a street down from Tim and Karen Crowley in Virginia Beach, Virginia for almost 10 years. So I was there when all of this was happening with David. Also was actually with David or Dan Sr. and Danny Jr. right before the deaths of David and Kamal and Rania. And also knew Kate and Dan Sr. not well, but we had family events, and I have perspectives of things now that I couldn't see before. And I think that's my part that I am offering, is maybe some answers to some questions that everyone has concerning this case, and things like, why doesn't anyone want to see justice? And my thoughts on the pathology of a family system that can create something like this and not care about bringing justice to one of their own. Also, I have some very interesting thoughts now that I'm out of the darkness, truly, because I was in the family system and was being told certain things about the case and about David and the whole situation. And it's just finally that I'm out of it and not around. We moved away, and I've begun to do my own listening to what you all have done and reading some of my own things, and just also my own experience within this family and what is possible. So I hope I can answer some of those questions and express my perspectives. I don't have any definitive yay or nay about what didn't happen. I just have a lot of hunch questions and things I want to see pursued.
When you first heard that David and his wife and his daughter were all dead, what were your first thoughts?
Oh, it was just disgusting. It was so sad. And we had just been with Danny Jr. and Dan Sr. at a Messiah concert. They came, which I thought was odd. I really thought that was odd that they came, because Danny Jr. had never come, and it was just them, because usually it would be, like maybe Allison, or I'd never met David and Rania and Kamal. But Kate and Dan were already divorced at that time, which is part of what I feel like my piece is very important as to the breakdown of that family system and the marriage, and how important that was and is to the whole story, and why David and Kamal and Rania would be alone, dying, murdered, whatever happened in that house and around that area. Kate was not allowed to know them or be involved. And that is what has really hit me, is that she was alienated, and this is what this family does. So there's a saying that goes, a dysfunctional toxic family is like an author who kills off anyone that isn't a part of the narrative any longer, expressing the narrative that they want expressed. So I'm not saying.
How do you feel they were trying to distance Kate from David and his wife? What do you think they were doing?
Oh, I mean, Dan Sr. and Kate, watching them alienate the two of them and destroy that marriage.
Oh, I see.
And then basically disparage Kate and set her up for that she was a failure, and she was keeping Dan Sr. back. I watched that happen. It was like a declaration a label put on her that was so toxic, and that was not my experience with her. She was a beautiful mom, very dedicated mom, and the family, the Crowley family, was a very very toxic family system. Dan Senior, he was a violent alcoholic, and Dan, whichever Dan, I'm not Danny Jr., Dan, the middle Dan, David's dad. When I was with Dan and Kate for a family event, Kate was telling me how much she was ministering to him and helping him with all of the, the trauma that he'd endured by his father, horrific trauma. And they were getting help. They were like in something like a Celebrate Recovery at church. They were leaders in their church. They were doing Baby Wise, which is, something my husband and I were doing for our babies. They were working toward health and healing, and Kate was the whistleblower in terms of the toxic family system. And so I watched her receive distortion and forcing her family to be destroyed. And my heart is broken for her, literally just broken as I'm watching this, because that is what's happening to me right now and my family. They're doing the same thing. They're stating that I'm dangerous. They're preparing everybody. It's a years-long process, alienating all of us. And then, I'm not kidding you, some of the things that they're participating in create despair and alienation, so that I could see the same thing happening to me and my family, or that they would try to, and that is separate us all, tell my own children, adult children, that I'm too dangerous to know. And then a Christmas comes and goes and my son is alone, and same kind of thing happens, where if he is hurt or if there is something going on in the family, they can't even call mom down the street to know the child, to know the grandchild, to know Rania, to know them, to be, come check on them. Why in the world was Kate not allowed to know her own son? And that is what I saw, the breakdown that happened is so evil that he couldn't, I don't believe they know his mom. And I believe he had a wonderful relationship with her, when I saw and heard.
Well, and she was the only one that stood up for David. She's the only one who said, I don't think my son did this. However, you do see in some of the writings, like in the journal, where, David and Camille talk about it, or maybe it was in an email where Allison, and they were all talking about how she was calling and she was just really drunk and out of control and they didn't want to deal with her anymore. I mean, did all of the alienation from the family cause her to drink, or is the drinking stuff just a made up story to keep David away?
Oh, I would not doubt if they completely exaggerated it or drove her to just desperation and crying and appealing, because that's what they're doing to me. And so then if you even have an emotion like, I'm being absolutely excommunicated from the family right now, very similarly to what I saw them do to her. And it creates a desperation in you. And then they have all the adult children gang up on you. This is all typical toxic family systems. And I wanted to just say to you guys that this is not a justice for David Crowley issue. It's a justice for Kate and a whistleblower trying to change a toxic family system. And whatever happened behind those doors, it was a family matter. And the issue is that they threw their own son under the bus, brother, and are okay with it and actually prefer it. And the whole study, the pathology of scapegoat abuse and, doing this type of stuff to their own, it's ostrich-like behavior. And scripture, Job says, the ostrich is a bird that only has one in her nest, and she puts all the others out to be trampled upon. And this is beast-like behaviors that we are encountering to this day. And so, of course, he killed himself. Of course, he was a loser. And of course, the whole deal with the producers fell apart. And I listened to Dan Hennon's interview with the producers, and I had a come to Jesus light bulb moment, because I really realized how much they lied about David and Kamal in the situation. They truly told us that they didn't have a deal, that he was in despair. And then I just went over the New Yorker article right now, and the way they loaded the language to make sure we all, believe that he was in a fetal position, he was doing all this stuff. Well, that I just believe the honest truth is that he was getting ready to be more successful than the patriarchs. And you don't do that in one of these clan families. You don't move to California. You don't get a movie deal, and you especially don't start writing out, who's all over the New Yorker article, someone by the name of Mason, a Mason maybe. You don't write them out of the story and the narrative. You don't do that. And, he got his hand slapped, his hand cut off. And he learned, he had to learn his lesson, and so did Kate. Kate learned her lesson at the end. You don't whistleblow. You don't tell the truth, and you don't change the dynamic. You're not allowed. And you're not allowed to ever be a healthy, healed, whole, loving God, good family that isn't completely overrun in dissipation. And dissipation is, just drunkenness and all of this. So it's ironic to me that, that's what would be stated about Kate, when in actuality, I think there were some other drunkards, that were leading that family, but I'm not going to name any names.
Well, what you say makes a lot of sense, because generally when people are raised in that type of an environment where there's either alcohol and or drug abuse,
Yes.
The child will go one of two ways. They'll either become an alcoholic or an addict themselves, or they will shun it. And David tended to, at least from what I could gather by his writing, is he was tending to shun it. Yes, he tried stuff, but it was not his cup of tea. So he's like, yeah, okay, I tried it. It was all right. I mean, he didn't, smoke pot until he was 28. That's pretty old in today's society. And then again, he only did it because of the influence of the guys around him. We're talking Mason, Hendricks, and all those other guys.
Yes, and speaking of those pictures and who they were and just the whole situation, just that is shameful and extremely disgusting. And, every one of us need to flip the script on each of them, because I guarantee you, I will be disparaged and told, how dare I, do this to this grieving family. I mean, we all had to feel so sorry for Danny Jr. And, it was just, such a nightmare, such a difficult thing to have to later find Paleo and disparage Paleo too, right? And that's a whole nother issue, the animal cruelty in this family and what they were willing to do to Paleo is why they were willing to do this to David. So, I think we need to flip the script and stop letting them bully all of us that they're such a grieving, sorrowful family. And, they need to do all this for the fans, and come back out with a new rendition or whatever. I think we need to turn and look at them if they continue to disparage you all and your work and you're sticking with the case, to basically say, why are you willing to continue to say this about your own brother and your own son? And, I saw some comments made after, his death right away that, Dan Sr. basically just said he killed himself and, that was it. I mean, there was that, and that's what they do. I mean, that's exactly what I watched them do to Kate. And you can't do anything right. It is so shameful these types of family systems. But I was telling Greg earlier that, you can have a toxic system, but it's like a storm or a vortex, is how my counselor and traumatologist is helping me understand this. Is like a vortex, but you may have a hurricane come in and it's a certain category. And so, maybe you just have to board up your windows and be careful and go in your storm shelter. And then you may have, what is the top category, like an F5?
Yeah, category 5 or an F5 tornado or category.
Yeah, right. Yes. And I feel like this family is, it's turned out to be an F5. And not every family is of this level, but this is a very toxic family and system. And then add all the elements of vulnerabilities and things like little man syndrome, and you can't ever be better than the patriarch, and lots of competing malignant behaviors and sabotage and weird gamemanship and intellect. That's another piece of all of this. These are all very gifted and extremely smart people. And so sometimes when people are that gifted and abused, then you're going to have these components where you have all these competing gifted, people. And so sibling rivalries and that kind of thing going on, which are, very real in this family that I'm in. So, if you're deemed a loser and you aren't, you're not succeeding, and you have a $15 million or whatever, contract with a TV series and brand and like 2.5 million views, from the perspective that I heard of David Crowley living amongst the Crowleys, Tim and Karen, he was the biggest loser on the face of the earth. And, like, he's so stupid, and like he believes this stuff, and, just no mercy, no understanding, no like, not from the perspective I was hearing. It was just the typical, Kate and Dave are losers and they must be alienated. And yeah, he did this to himself because they have no money. Mind you, you're competing with multimillionaires and people who, money is everything. So the fact that David was stating that he was going to be a millionaire, and I think he was on the road to doing that. I don't think you get to do that in that system. A lot of disparaging cursing that goes on. I'm talking real curses, like warlock cursing. Whether they understand the power of that, I believe that is what we're seeing too, is they just cursed and cursed and cursed. So I don't believe they will ever, pursue any justice. They don't believe he deserves it. They don't believe he deserves it.
In what you're saying now, it kind of sheds light on a lot of stuff, especially when, and it's been in the medical report this whole time. Mm-hmm. But again, sometimes it just takes us a while to have that word stick. But that one word settles the entire case, and that's the word marked. And mm-hmm. when they put that on David's autopsy, and this is by the ME who autopsied all three.
Yeah.
And so he's stating that he is further along in the decomp process. And if you're further along, you die first. There's no way to get past that. It's like trying to tell somebody that a hammer is a nail. No, that's a nail. It's not a hammer. No, it's not. And it's the same thing here. It is, you can't take it back. They can't revoke what they've said. It's too late. They wrote it. It's there. And to have them, and we know that they know this because people run back and tell them what we do. So they know it.
Okay.
And it's like, but you guys don't give a rat's hindsight? I'm like, if somebody found that about one of my family members, I would be all over that. And you better believe I'd be at that police station 24/7 until they reopen that case. And with David, it's like nothing. But now what you're saying is kind of making sense. What they're
doing. Mom Kate has to be, she has to die, in her backyard with an alcohol bottle. And that's very suspicious to me.
Yeah, sitting on a table on her back porch. That just didn't make sense.
The truth teller whistleblower, saying something is, and probably absolutely in complete despair of what they were doing to her reputation, and making sure she could never see any of them It's what they're doing to me. So, I mean, it is one of the most just murderous, evil, soul murder things to go through. So, for her to be framed because, she would have been the biggest advocate for him. And of course, this is just all, I'm just really realizing it even further. But, one of the things too, I just listened to some of the things you guys just posted earlier, a couple weeks ago. And you said that his hand was missing.
Yes.
And his right hand. And I think, you can do a lot with someone's hand and frame them after you've killed them. And, you can put fingerprints, you can draw something in blood with a hand, you can, do a lot of stuff with a hand. And so I felt like that is something that is really, really, really damning.
Well, that's what surprises me, because we've all, thought the same thing, what you're saying. However, the evidence doesn't support that that's what they did. So I'm like, there's none of David's DNA is missing from the house. It's his home. And there's none of it that was on any of the swabs taken that should have been, and especially on the wall. So you would think that if they're going to set him up, they would use, I know it's disgusting, but you would think that they would use the hand that they took to write on the wall with, but it doesn't appear that that's what happened.
Well, that just the way all of this has come down. And then the other piece, I of course went to and have wanted to focus on Paleo and how he's been framed and the animal cruelty and the whole, just it's a joke that, how dare Kamal be a vegetarian nutritionist, care about, meat and all that stuff. And then their beloved dog is framed with scavenging them. And again, that to me, I've talked about this many times, but the whole dog behaviors, we had a dog when I was growing up that ate a small chicken bone, and hands aren't they splintery, and things. I mean, come on, that dog would have died. And then the other piece of this is, I saw that huge bag of dog food in the kitchen. Our little cat can eat through, and she's fed normally, eat through the cat food, the thick cat food bags. And that house does not look like there was a dog that was starving and upset. And, it looked like there was a dog that was put in there with things that were framed and staged. Exactly what you say, Greg. The gray stage. It just is so staged.
After the blood had dried, because there are no prints of the dog. So the dog did not step in any wet blood.
That right. The other piece is a dog would be all over the counters trying to get water, like get food. If there was anything in a dishwasher, licking up all those dishes before he would eat his own beloved, masters. And there would have been massive amounts of barking that the whole neighborhood would have heard. I do not believe that dog would have not been barking, and then only someone hears them January, whatever date. That is just ridiculous. With that back door open, that dog would have nudged that door open and would have done all kinds of things. So the fact that they've framed the dog too, I think dog lovers and animal lovers should just put so much shame on them. And then who becomes a hero at the end? Danny Jr. saving the dog. Weird. And then the GoFundMe and the whole thing, and then go to California and try to be, I just looked at Danny Crowley Jr.'s, looked him up on Google. He's on top of the gray state. He's now the picture on there.
You're kidding.
No. And, where's David? It said he's the picture. I'm telling you what, if they're so willing to disparage David Crowley's reputation and name, then why don't they start, looking at themselves and saying, hey, maybe what we're doing is inappropriate. If they're not guilty, then they need to shut their faces and just go down into, anonymous oblivion and stop disparaging him. They don't say one good thing about the man. They can't even acknowledge the amount of the amount of likes he had, 2.5 million. That's just way, too powerful. That he had a deal, that he had a brand, that he had producers in California. They are such envious people that you don't do that in this family. You're just not allowed.
That is so weird. Yeah, because David, I mean, he was talented. The guy had a gift.
No, he's not for this family.
Wow.
They thought he was weird. No, he wasn't. And guess what? No, the queen bees, the powers that be said these two, Kate and David, must be labeled and out. Nothing you do, nothing he does, nothing Kate did could convince the queen bees and the powers that be that you're allowed to be anything but what they say you're allowed to be. And that must be down, dark, diminished, dehumanized, all these D words, death. So D words, go with darkness, go with demons, all of it. So if there was, dark things going on, the power of suggestion is a very powerful thing. And I believe that's what we're watching with all of this. Loading the language. I did some cult deprogramming when I was, in my field and my work. And you're taught to see, how they load the language. And every single thing that I've seen, from the New Yorker to Herzog to every part of this, is called loading the language. They are directing everybody to that label, and no one is allowed to question that. And I'm telling you, there is violence threatened to us if we even got involved in the case or looked in the case or cared. And then the other piece, I was caring for all the children, the Crowley children, and my own children. And, I was doing grief work in advocacy internationally. And I'm so troubled with how these kids were treated they're not allowed to talk about David Crowley. They're not allowed to go look at that case. They're really not allowed to even question anything. And, some of them were very bonded to him and bonded to Rania, and, not allowed to grieve it. Just water under the bridge is what we were told. Water under the bridge. And if, yeah, oh yeah, no, this is done.
That's vile and disgusting.
No. It's just horrible. You can't. I mean, there's no mention. There's no, and the grandmother is an invalid and crippled and a beautiful woman, but she's a nothing. She's a nothing. Her voice means nothing. So, it's very much a hierarchy system of, very para-alcoholic. And one of the things I told Tim, after hearing his childhood story, I said, "Oh my gosh, Tim, I think you may have the worst childhood I've ever heard in my life."
You're talking about the grandma of on David's side or Kate's side? Okay, on
David's side, yeah. And, just really, really horrific trauma, horrific abuse, horrific, just cruelty.
Physical, mental.
Oh yeah, all of it. Alienation, cursings. I mean, just violence, beatings. Tim was left alone with his mother to care for her as she was becoming crippled. When he was like 8 to 12 years old, and
just to clarify, Tim, we're talking about the brother of Dan Crowley Sr. So David's uncle.
Yeah, and my sister married him, and that's, I was caring for other children, and we lived down the street and very involved. And, I knew that Tim was communicating to David, and like his mentor, because he was a producer and himself and wanted to do what David did. And see, this is the thing that I think is really, really important to understand, is that David was, becoming successful, more successful than he should have been, than he was allowed to. And see, you're just in these systems that are not in any kind of therapy or restoration. They just won't see that in themselves, and they'll just be instinctive in destroying the competition, even if it's their own nephews or their own nieces or their own sisters, so they're just a very destructive, competitive way of doing things. So that is why I do not believe you will ever have them care, see justice. And if there's anyone that's involved in the case and continuing it, that has a revenge, it would be, like a Danny Mason, who has stated many, many times, this was mine, I was doing this. And there's a lot of revenge, and he's involved in all of the New Yorker and, Herzog the Hedgehog, my favorite character, who states, that all the world is a stage, and they made sure that David Crowley's was. I just question, did they have this set up for a Frame film festival that was coming up, that they, put the mockument or the slopomentary, whatever you call it? I just really question the how fast everything was sold to Herzog, how quickly the huge, how much attention it got from the biggies. You don't get that kind of attention. That's very hard, very hard. And then the other thing that was really questionable to me was they said in the New Yorker piece that Dan Sr. immediately was in like scrubbing and managing the videos and all of the the timeline and the journals. So I don't think that that's safe to know whether or not you can even trust those journals.
Yeah, it's clear that somebody had gone, at least what we had received, someone had gone in and had been erasing and then added some, but most of it was a lot of erasing. And you can tell because there were certain entries where it just would, like a sentence, and then stop at a word. And it's
really study the New Yorker and what they pulled out, and then what they, that to me is so, it's just so devious how they handled the selling of it. And then all of a sudden now, the dad and the brother are going to California, and he's on the IMBD, which means like he's a producer and the writer of The Gray State. He gets the dog, it's just, to me, to me, and anyone questioning it is is just so horrible, because they're such a grieving family. They're so grieving, and that the way that they handled the pictures of them posting in the house, just giddy with the goons. It's just they look like they were high on something. High on that was inappropriate. All of it's inappropriate. Shame on them. And this is what they do. And you know what? I'm not suicidal. We're not suicidal. So, it's a vortex. It's an F5 family. It's not your typical. And, they're doing it to me and my family right now. So, they've set it up that I'm a danger, and they've been preparing everybody, and I must be alienated, and then alienate the sons. It's all typical beast, predatory behaviors. And the problem is that I'm observing what has happened to the Crowleys, and I'm like, we're not going to let that happen to us. We're going to try with all our might to not let it happen to us. And so, does that mean that I believe that they committed these crimes? I believe the crime is that they will not take accountability for creating this alienation in a family where Kate couldn't go be with her son over Christmas, that everybody was disparaging the mother, not honoring her, because she's the competition to the queens, and she's whistleblowing, and the kings. And so that's what the crime is. The crime is that something happened in that house. None of us will ever know except those involved. And, the mother, their mother and grandmother couldn't go check on them over Christmas and be there with them. That's the real crime. And for anyone to put all of that on David in any way at all that's what they're trying to do to me and my family right now. And so it causes the kids the adult kids to just, it's so horrible. I can't even tell you guys. It's called parental alienation abuse. It's literally, it's a real psychological abuse, and then emotional abuse, and the words that they put in. So a lot of the second guessing, or if there was anything that David was writing that he was second guessing, that is what was being told us and them. It's like a brainwashing of cursings and darkness, and you're not worthy, and you're a loser, just kill yourself, just, like a constant barrage. And so it's like being targeted. And I don't know if they were possibly a targeted family, that this is something going on that they're studying, like for the Cuban diplomats. A lot of our diplomats are having like a voice come and tell them to do things. And that's, like that is a real possibility. And after looking at everything, I really question all the voices and everything involved to create a perfect storm, and then how quickly the documentary was made, and how quickly it was, put into the film festivals, and how quick, who's involved. One thing I would say is really interesting is Tim Crowley taught me something. I was PTA president one year of our little school, and he comes in and he goes, "Oh my gosh, Kristen, do you understand who the PTA is?" Goes, because what I do is I always go look at an organization, and I go look to the root of who's on the board and who they're connected to. And so, I'm like, no, I'm not, yeah, I just think it's a, parent teacher association. He goes, no, it's a lobbying group for like the Marxists. And they go, they're a lobbying group, and they make all the teachers pay their dues. So when I became president that year, we had extra money in the budget from the year before. And so I worked with the principal and told him, I'm like, man, I found out this is a lobbying group. It's not even for the parents and the teachers. It's to whatever agenda the PTA is in. They want that agenda pushed. And so these teachers have no money. They have to buy their own school supplies, yet they have to pay these, $40 dues every year. So my first order of business as president was to pay all the dues for all the teachers. And man, when we announced that, right when I became president, the whole group, the whole teachers, like a whole auditorium, they just stood up and cheered and were like, "You're our hero," So my point in saying this is Tim taught me how to go down to the root and look at who's really running things, and who's really in charge, and who's really benefiting from this. And I think more than even looking at the Crowley family, I think we have to look at the Herzog situation. Who is involved with the film festival? Who is involved? What producers? And go down to the root of Herzog, and go down to the root of Eric Nilsson and all of that. And that to me is more important, because then, it was just so suspicious. That is so suspicious to me, how quickly, all of that got such notoriety, and still 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. That may be one of the worst documentaries I have ever seen. It was so bad. It sucked.
Yeah.
Well, I know it wasn't 100% because I voted it down.
Right.
Well, it didn't, I guess it didn't
Everywhere
count. Because, if you go and look at it, it's like, 100%. It's like really nothing on Rotten Tomatoes is 100%.
Well, it's like you, Greg, you're doxxed, and I know we have 3 viewers tonight, and you always only have 1 in anything that you ever do, right? And then David Crowley's 2 whatever million views, they don't get to be acknowledged either in this situation. But Herzog definitely, and the New Yorker definitely noticed his skill as a very gifted film producer. And I thought, oh, that's very interesting, because we would never hear something like that. That David Crowley is gifted beyond anyone else. You're not allowed. So we have very gifted people in the family in performing arts, etc. And he was not supposed to rise like that. The rise, he's not supposed to.
Not supposed to rise.
No. Mm-mm.
Was this relationship between Timothy Crowley, David's uncle, and him, as David is working on this, is it more Tim Crowley contacting David? Is it more David contacting Tim for advice? Is it kind of a mix back and forth? What is their relationship?
I really don't know, but Tim would be talking to them about the movie and ideas, for hours, like while he would be working on the yard or whatever, like with the earpiece in. So I didn't know if it was to Dan or if it was to David, but he was like a mentor from what I understood to David. And
with the conversation, what year would you say, if you had to guess? 2012, 2011?
The whole time. So, when did he get back? When he went to film school, I think Tim would have been really instrumental in having him go to film school.
Okay.
Very instrumental. So whenever that started, and all the conspiracy theories, Tim was a huge conspiracy theorist, but kind of hidden, because my sister is extremely against it. And she's a very powerful attorney, corporate attorney, bankruptcy attorney. And, she did not approve of David's, what he was doing. And so I believe she was very powerful. I do believe that she started disparaging what he was doing and thought it was so stupid, and, just like declaring what Herzog said, and that is, you start going down this road, you're going to turn mad, and then you're going to become the poster child that you never get to question the narrative.
How did Tim feel about that with his wife kind of disparaging David Crowley? Was he disparaging David Crowley too, or was he kind of in the middle?
No, he was a quiet closet. But he was very vocal with them, so like he didn't believe in vaccines, and he would have been totally into, I think, like believing that what David found out, and really, loving it, but not being allowed to communicate that to any of us at the house. She would take him to task, and she hates all of that. And so she thinks, she kind of acts like, well, David did this to himself, and what her attitude would be, even though we're totally estranged right now, and I believe probably forever, but right now she would say, oh, you're crazy, you're going to go mad just like David, because you're getting into, you're hobnobbing with conspiracy theorists, and you're not allowed to question her, you're not allowed to question people. So she's definitely a big part in, I believe, what has happened, in terms of Kate and David's alienation, and then declarations. Nobody in the family is allowed to have any other narrative but what she has declared of them. And so she's a very, very powerful person, and, they're very, very wealthy. And so David was just a loser. If you have, if you only have a couple million in the bank or whatever, and you only have one house that you own, you don't have, properties, and, I'm the biggest loser of all. On the hierarchy pyramid, I'm the, I'm the garbage can, and nothing I do means anything, So that's what David was labeled.
I don't know, and I'm just asking if it's a possibility. I'm not accusing this attorney, but when we kept asking for more and more information through FOIAs, and then the city attorney had the audacity to send both Greg and another Sophia a letter stating no more information is being sent out, if we are because this is a murder case, and if we get something in, we can then take somebody else to court. They've already adjudicated the case. That entire excuse is the biggest line of BS I've ever heard. It's not legally binding. It's just a lot of legal mumbo jumbo to keep us from asking. And we don't have attorneys to fight that, because a judge would easily turn it over because it doesn't make sense. The case is adjudicated. It's over. What they have is available. So would someone like her have the ability to put a bug in the city attorney's ear? I'm not saying she did. I'm just asking.
She wouldn't care.
Okay.
No, she doesn't care about any of it. There would be no, no, she wouldn't spend 1 ounce of time even.
Well, I'm trying to figure out who did, because like I said, there's a lot of information we didn't get, and everything they sent us, we found where they were screwing up.
Well, I really believe that the piece that maybe is missing is kind of understanding who's involved, who got the money, who got access to all of those videos, and that whole group. That, to me, they are the ones running this. And I think the beneficiaries are, the people who received the money and sold his private stuff to them without his mother's, their mother's permission. And that's a whole nother thing. Why Kate wasn't the one managing her own son's life and granddaughter, and that's
why was Dan Jr.
Why was it Danny Jr.?
Mm-hmm.
That is weirder than snot to me. And so that's just not normal. And her questioning things, because it's all very suspicious, all of it. So, the fact that she couldn't go in there and protect her son's vulnerable stuff, from anybody looking at it and keep it secure so that she could run with his vision, and protect his image and protect his reputation, and say, the possibility exists that he was targeted, and this is just a nightmare for her. I mean, I just can't even imagine. She was a beautiful, dedicated, loving, amazing wife. I mean, just really nurturing, really comforting. She would have been that comfort to him and his daughter. And so the fact that he didn't have his mother and still doesn't have his mother to defend him, that's such a big part of this, you guys. And my heart just breaks, still for her and the grandmother that's an invalid, having to watch her grandson's name be dragged through the mud still. And like you guys said, I think it is so true. These are the same people dragging his name through the mud that also want to benefit now from the gray state. That is really sick.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, if they believe that he's a child murderer and he's such a horrific, he went into madness. Go freaking make your own amazing, tell-all expose. They can't.
Yeah, they're saying that Gray State drove him crazy, but yet they want to take Gray State and make money from it. So it made him crazy, but it won't make you crazy?
Right. Yeah, I think crazy is I think they're telling on themselves, the whole group of them in the New Yorker and in Herzog. And I looked at, the whole Gray State documentary trailer and read, the Wikipedia and all that. And whoever the last statements, just, go back and read some of the statements they make. And I just think that the things that they say are so important, the way they word stuff, and that they benefited and are benefiting from this whole thing. But you know what? They did not, the powers that be did not want that film out before COVID. And
that I agree.
FEMA is involved with a lot of things. So the fact that he had FEMA, the fact that he had the aprons, the fact that he had the demonic Masonic order of the Yabba Dabba Doo, he was doing a tell-all on the orders and societies, and it's just gross. The whole thing is sick. It's dark. And, what you guys have done in your journalism and staying with it is really justice. And that's what I'm finding in other cases I'm working on and in, my own personal life, that there's not a lot of justice going on in our in our country and places. And, unless you know powerful people and your name is Herzog and you can get a documentary done very quickly, there's not a lot of swift justice. And the best that we can do, I think at this point, is what you guys have done, and you have done an incredible job staying with it. And that's justice. That's justice to me, that you guys are, writing about it and keep questioning and what you've done. And I think given this family and the situation, I think that's God's justice. And I was telling Greg, the fact that you guys have stayed on it, and I have been in the dark. I mean, truly been on and terrified. And so, the fact that you guys have stayed on it, to me, is a witness and a testimony to there's something that heaven knows, and there's light that has to stay there, right? Because God knows, Ranya's blood is crying out forever. Paleo has been disparaged. Kate's blood, Kamal's blood, David's blood is crying out like Abel's. And, you guys are a part of really, really, really positive and good things and justice. And so I think you're a real threat. And they, of course, want to disparage you. Now watch, this is what they do. So you guys are doing this. You've been doing it for a long time. You've had a lot of views, and then sometimes not a lot, but they just disparage who you are as people. You're nothing, just very diminishing and dehumanizing.
That's what's so funny, because they've sent their goons out, and I'm just like going, y'all don't even know. You don't know how I grew up. It's hilarious. You can call me what you want. You can say what you want. It's not going to affect me. It's not going to make me stop, because your words are not my reality. So.
Well, it's like mafia, it's like what's going on with, different whistleblowers. And, they just dox you and disparage you and diminish your work. And
complain on the videos. I cannot tell you, my videos are systematically being taken down by YouTube. And they're, somebody's complaint. We got a complaint about this. And so I'm like going, and I can't fight it. I can't even so much as say, well, here's what, they just completely delete everything.
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, okay. Yeah. I'll redo them. I wasn't going to do anymore, but now you're giving me an excuse. I get to go back and redo them all over.
Yeah. And I think that understanding those tactics, that's, the fact that that's still happening, instead of like contacting you and saying, well, oh my gosh, of course we want to be a part of clearing his name and getting down to the bottom of this. And that's what you're questioning as an outsider. Like, this is just weird.
Yeah,
it is. I'm telling you,
one of my latest videos was taken down was one that was titled "Bloody Clothes," where I go over all of their clothes from the medical examiner, and the reason is because somebody said that it was about somebody unaliving themselves. And so that goes against their policy. So they went in and they just deleted it. You have to understand, we're deleting this because this is against our policy. And I tried to write back going, this has nothing to do with unaliving. And it just, of course, didn't go anywhere. And they just took it right off. And I'm like, well, okay, I'll just do it again.
Right. Yeah. And I think that, people understanding that they get involved in justice like this, justice journalism, that it's definitely a risk, and can learn from you guys. Now, when we lived in Virginia Beach, the headquarters of Investigate Discovery, all the true crime, their headquarters are there in Newport News. And my family, we actually were actors for them. My husband and my son were in Alaska Ice Cold Killers, the true story of Hansen murders, that then became a movie with I can't remember the name of the actress, but these were all different reenactment true stories. And I think this case needs some more attention like that. And maybe doing a mockumentary. I was telling Greg that I would love to do a satire on the on the documentary and the Herzog. And I have a character named Hedgehog the Herzog. And, I'm really fixated on the, just the swiftness of all of that and really wanting to flip the script and do like a gray stage, just satire with music and, just how ridiculous it is, because that's the point where it is now. And so guess what? Everybody needs to put their big boy panties on and big girl panties on in that family and stop pretending like they're so sad. And, if we end up doing something that's satirical on that stupid Rotten Tomato documentary with Herzog, then so be it. They need to just recognize that other people can say things that we think. If they can say these kinds of things about David and Paleo and Kate, right, and do this, like, why do they get to say whatever they want with no consequence?
That's a good question.
And why are we bullied? And why are we afraid to say how stupid this is and ridiculous and mock it? Because it is stupid and it needs to be mocked. And you guys have been doing that, and that's why I love, Greg, your gray stage. I mean, that to me is so brilliant. I think that was a God justice. The fact that you got that book done, I mean, so quickly, that was grace, because they got their money and their part done so quickly, right? I mean, yeah. I mean, you've been totally led by love and light, and I just can't tell you enough how appreciative I am. And I think someone else said this, like, you were with the Woo's News kid that you were, and he said, man, if anybody came after me and I'm dead, and eaten by my dog or, whatever. I mean, he was like, I would want everybody to turn every stone over, to help clear my name. I'd want my friends to fight for me.
David has nobody other than you now. You know what I mean? Nobody. And other than total strangers have come to his, defense. Yeah. And that is appalling. Absolutely appalling.
Very, 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 very appalling. And that is the system. And that's what I'm trying to tell you. They won't even take accountability for the toxic family system that would create, where they would create something like this and say this about their own and do this. One of the worst, most horrific cases. And then not even, really even honoring his service. And like you said, just immediately saying that he wrote Allah Akbar because he doesn't like the Muslim people. And that is so against his character, and that he actually realized the Afghani war was a scam, and he loved the people, and he loved, and so it's just, to me, there's something in the New Yorker article, and it was when the Hendricks guy was quoted, and he was quoted as saying something about the Nordic race or something, and I think we need to look at that, because I feel like that's like the order that they're all working with in Europe. And there's powers that be that did not, that had to make him the scapegoat. And that's what I'm trying to say. Scapegoat abuse, alienation abuse, all these things are very real, and that is what we're seeing with Kate and David. And I don't know what happened. I don't know. All I know is that Kate couldn't go check on her son over Christmas and her grandchild. And that's really what we need to be focusing on. And she was questioning things. He doesn't have an advocate. He doesn't have his mother. And it was very weird, because they're doing it to me now. My own children feel like they can't know me. I'm too dangerous.
Why?
So, because I'm a truth teller, like Kate was. And I've been in there, I've been trying to get out of this toxic family system, and I'm labeled and I'm a scapegoat, and that's how this works. So the fact that I'm experiencing it on this level now and seeing the mind games and the label, and then every narrative has to fit those lies in that label. I don't care if you have tons of proof. It's almost like a spiritual force towards that darkness. And if you aren't ready for it to sweep you into its river current, you have no chance of survival. It's that dark. And so walking it out right now and knowing that's what that's what's been done to Kate, and then just, not being able to go see her family, go see them and be with them over Christmas and check on them.
It sounds like you're trying to escape Dante's Inferno. Seriously, it's what it sounds like.
Yeah, it's dark. It is a dark, dark, dark case. And again, I think it's an F5 and it's a vortex, and I'm experiencing it. And it's not a David Crowley, it's a Crowley family, issue. And the fact that they want to keep scapegoating him is just, the whole toxicity. So I think that's why you guys won't see justice, why it answers a lot of questions, and just family system studies, and understanding dysfunctional alcohol system families and how they operate is really what we're seeing. And then you have it institutionally, and you have it with our lovely friend Herzog, and Nilsson, and the whole film industry that is benefiting from this case. And that's the truth. I mean, I went and looked up the film festival that it was put in, and I think that's all very interesting. Go down to the root, who's involved. It's all the usual suspects. Like think like IRA Roth. I won't say the last part, but Roth, and then they have children. I'm giving you a code. That's a name that's on there. Think Killer of the Flower Moon, someone that just produced that, is on the film festival. So I think that's really important for us to understand that the people involved that gave them the money and they gave them the access to his videos, and that we can't trust Day One Journal. I don't think you can trust those journals. I don't think that evidence is safe.
Well, I mean, the funny thing is, and this is what I've been saying for a long time,
really,
is whoever did this was so inept. They made so many mistakes.
Yeah.
And they didn't seem to understand that, you can get rid of a lot of information, but you can't get rid of all of it, and you only need just that one piece.
Yeah.
So the one piece of information where somebody accessed David and Kamel's laptop after they were already deceased, okay, you can't get rid of that. I mean, the computer's going to log that information. So we have that, and we know, like you said, you said they probably have. Well, we know by looking at the Day One Journal, somebody went in and started deleting a lot of stuff.
Oh, and inserting.
Yes.
I would say too, inserting, what the narrative was. I think this was set up as a narrative that was going to become, look at the New Yorker article, because they stated what the goal was. Mm-hmm. The goal of this whole thing was something that Hendricks said that he and look at the New Yorker article. It's very interesting, and that's where he brought up the Norse stuff, and like, before you die, you have to do this, almost like a mythology, like turning him into a myth and an example. All of that is in the New Yorker. And if we start to understand loading the language and preparing things ahead of time and setting up the evidence, I think what you're seeing is a group of people that knew that there would never be justice, and they had it in the bag. They had it in the bag. And the reason I kind of understand that is I'm going through it right now with my husband's family trust. Was a prolific journalist and whistleblower, and we're experiencing some of the same things. He experienced some of the same things institutionally. And so this is just systems studies communism, Marxism, all that kind of stuff, bullying, system studies, and taking over. And, journalists are a very important piece. If you study the Holocaust, the person who created problems for the main plan in Palestine, etc., was a journalist, a truth teller. So the fact that you guys are doing this, is very dangerous. And I mean, it's very important justice that you're a part of. And I think it's really where the only justice that any of us, common people are going to start continuing to see. So, if we can just keep shining the light on, we have the sorrow piece, but if we can go towards now the satire and mocking the ridiculousness of it somehow, that's what I hope we can bring, a mocking, type of musical or writings or additions to what you're doing already, Greg, and bring it into the realm of just, this is so ridiculous. It's not even believable, right?
Have you ever seen the video that Catherine did called Ordo Ab Chao? Is that what it was, Catherine?
Yeah.
Is that how you pronounce
Ordo
it?
Ab Chao.
Oh, I got to send you that one. You'd be very interested in that one.
Okay.
Yeah, because I covered a lot of the stuff that you're talking about.
Okay.
Mason Hendrix's tattoos, Mason's connection with the Masonic lodges. I covered all of that. Dan narrated it for us. I forget what.
Catherine wrote the whole thing.
Wow, cool.
It was really good.
It took me months to put it together.
But
I had some help who got me started on that, and that was Altian Childs. We were doing a lot of talking.
Oh, I love him.
Yeah, I do too. He's like my bud. And so when I saw the 5-hour thing or whatever he did, we talked a lot. So over a couple of years, we kept going back and forth. And so I finally said, I think I'm going to do it. He says, okay, once you get it done, let me know. And
it's really good. Very well done.
Yes, and that that's a big piece of this. He was exposing that whole group, right? And so we've got to understand that is a very big piece of all of this.
Yeah, because when Elton was exposing certain things in his video, it was snapping with things I remembered from the case. And so, I'm writing them, I'm going, hey, and at first, when we were going over stuff, and at first he thought, because he was defending David, and then he's like, oh no, I wonder if David was really in this. I'm so sad he was in this. And I wrote him back, I said, no, David wasn't into it. He was exposing it, but the people around him were in it.
Yeah. And just he was really hitting the nerves. Mm-hmm. He was hitting the nerve center on and just too close. And we had to get into this is a warning to all of you that dare hit a nerve center. You're not allowed to do that. And then we'll disparage you, we'll turn you into a dystopian, all the D words. So you guys being deliverers for David and the Crowleys and Paleo and Kate, you're deliverers because of your determination. And, determination brings deliverance from all the D words, dissipation and darkness and dehumanizing and all the things that David and Kate were experiencing and that you're experiencing and I'm experiencing because we are really making a difference, even just one by one. Just bringing a cup of cold water to somebody is very important in the kingdom of love. Writing one letter, one video, one view is a very, the mustard seed principle is very, very, very important. And that's what you've been doing. And man, I'm just so happy. And you guys have put them to shame.
Well, I'm so grateful. It's like I'm always teasing Greg. It's like, dude, you're young enough to be my son. So but see, that's always me. I'm always, no matter what room I'm in, I don't care if somebody's 90 or you have a 2-year-old. I'm going to be the mom. I'm the mom.
Right.
And so, it's like Greg's like my son. And what I love about him is that he's a lot. We have a lot of the same personality traits. It's like, We don't care. Go ahead. Come after us. What are you going to do? You may knock us down. We will get up again, because if the truth is on our side, we are called to put out the truth.
Yes.
The Creator holds us responsible. If we don't speak that truth, we have to answer to the big guy. And I'm sorry, I think I'm more afraid of the big guy than them.
Hey, and that's really evident, and I can't thank you guys enough, because, your resilience and determination has allowed me to come out of the darkness. I got back in it right now, but and be able to speak up and walk this out and see what a little walking a mile maybe in their shoes, as to what it feels like to be at the cusp of your dreams coming true, and making sure that they're sabotaged, and then you're disparaged, and no one can even say in the family, like, oh man, he served his country. I mean, you just aren't allowed. You're not allowed.
But you know what you just said is so true. Just prior to that, is whoever did this, and we all have our ideas as to who it was.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the whole entire thing was set up and timed, and it was like a slap in his face. Oh, you thought you were going to succeed?
Exactly.
No, you're not. We're going to stop it. And how horrible is that? He works so hard day and night, many hours, hundreds of hours a week.
Yeah.
And they just were so, instead of getting in and working and creating their own successes, when they found out they could no longer ride his coattails, they got even.
Yes. And the number one emotion of the dark bully is revenge. And I think what we're watching is a revenge on him and them. And that is, the psychopath, or, sociopathic, and the pathology of it. And so I think that studying systems studies and revenge and all of that, and I've had to, for survival recently, start studying that and how to deal with it when you become the target, right? And he was the target. So that's the part of it. And so was Kate. And what we watched is them successfully bring those targets down. And I got to be in on the inside. And so I hope for all of your listeners and all the work that you guys have done, first of all, that you're encouraged for sticking with it all these years. Secondly, that justice is already being done by what you have done and are doing. And so remember, you said you wanted his name cleared. You're clearing his name. And the only person that is going to be able to clear his name ultimately, and has already, is the Father God. And that's the truth, the creator of the universe, who's the judge of all. He has already cleared their names because he knows what's gone on. He knows every detail. And so that's, the light's already in there. It's just how long is this going to be allowed to be in the dark and get away with it? Well, I think that's not, we don't understand all of the aspects of all of that, but I'm learning a lot more about whistleblowing and truth telling and bullies and standing up to them. But you guys have definitely, led in that, in inspiration. And then I hope to encourage you also that maybe, Greg, getting it like on Investigate Discovery, or like some scripts for some other means of telling the story from the perspective, I don't know. And I'd be willing to collaborate and maybe write some things that could help with dealing with the New Yorker and the Herzog piece a little bit more, and going deeper into why they were paid, why that happened so quickly. I just feel like that's so incriminating, because you don't have, most of the time, like a murder suicide from a military situation. I mean, that it's not common, but it's not like it doesn't happen, right? And it's so, to have this attention so quickly, and the way the New Yorker worded everything. I mean, it's like they are so mad at him for having 2.5 million views. I mean, that number one. And that he really was talented, and he really was a threat, and this is a revenge.
Yeah, and then you have all of these guys and gals who spent a lot of that time doing truth teller shows and things like that, and these guys are trying to expose all of these things, but when it comes to David Crowley, they all turn silent. So it's like it's not just the mainstream media, it's the alternative media too.
Yeah,
it's like everybody got their cue to just shut up and stop talking about this. Now, I expected that from the mainstream media. I did not expect that from the alternative media.
Yes, interesting. But when I listened to Dan Hennon's interview with the producer, the Mike, that was it for me. I was so lied to. We were so lied to. And he was so level-headed, and the way he expressed how David was is so anti what we've been told. And see, that's the piece I think that is really crucial, is that producer, he does not believe that David was capable of doing this, that he was in any kind of despair. He was excited. He was writing it, and everything they put in the day journals and all of that, whatever was in the day journals, made it look like he didn't have the deal. He wasn't excited. He was in despair. And and that's what they told us, that he was a loser. He'd lost all his money. He wanted to murder Rania because she was autistic. He didn't like her. He was abusive. He was doing all this to Kamal, and he was just off the rails, and he got into drugs, and he just went into despair because there was no hope.
Yeah. No, we were constantly told that these day one journals would answer all of our questions and it would show why David did it. And then we get it and there's nothing in there. David doesn't talk about the deal being dead. And one of the craziest things about the journal is in the 94 pages of the actual police reports, the journal ends on a different day than the journal that we got. So it's like the dates are even wrong. So when you were both talking about how it's like, it looks like the journal had been messed with.
Yeah.
How did the police not get the full journal, and how did they get it later on too? It's just
exactly. Kind of like the bullet, being found by the goons.
It shows up. Yeah.
Yeah. After they did their little satanic ritual, in absolute joy and posted themselves. I mean, come on. This is where I hope we can do satire on all of that.
Yeah.
It's just so blatantly in our face, and they, that whole group cracks up, and they just think that they've gotten away with it. And the fact that you guys have stayed on it is, no, they didn't. And thank you.
Well, and when they make stupid mistakes, like going back to the journal, like we all know it's been messed with, but then they forgot one part where David wrote at the end where he said, "I'm so excited. I finally have connected with Rania and things are so good with us." And that was like September or October.
Oh, that is so sad.
And he was like, "Yay, I finally bonded with her and things are great." And y'all missed that one. So, I mean, it's ridiculous.
Now, something that's coming back to me is Allison, the sister, after his death. She was with us at the family house in Virginia Beach. And I'm skilled and trained in grief and trauma. And so I was just, talking to her, being real. And she started to cry, and I started to hug her and hold her and just grieve with her. And the way I was treated after that, Allison was not allowed to talk to me ever again. I was too dangerous. Because you don't cry, you don't grieve, you are a heart of stone, and it's water under the bridge, and your brother is a loser, and you just better accept it. And he killed himself, and there's no questioning, and there's no, and all proof leads towards the judgment that took place the day after he did. They went in there, and there's nobody questioning. Mom couldn't even go and be in the house with the grandchild over the holiday. I'm questioning it. I've been questioning it. I was living it. It's weird. It is weird.
Speaking of that, when you say that Kate couldn't be there,
Yeah.
Then you also said we talked about a little bit on and I believe according to my notes this was around December 14th of 2014 that Dan Senior and Dan Junior showed up at a family concert in Southern California.
No, in Virginia Beach.
Virginia Beach, and that was kind of unusual. It wasn't something that they would normally. When's the last time that they had been there prior to then? Would you say?
Maybe Dan one time, and barely at all. And I just thought it was so odd that the two of them were together.
And were they there for how long were they there? A day?
Couple days.
Couple days.
Yeah, and we all went to sushi afterward, and I was kind of interested. I was interested in the dynamic. Dan was dating girl. Dan Senior was dating, and they had divorced, and I was very sad, for their marriage to have what happened to it. But all I ever heard was Kate just kept him back. And the minute Kate was out of the picture, he became rich, and he got this big deal with China, and he made millions. And so he's the king, he's the winner because now he's a multimillionaire. And, it's
how was your sister towards Dan Senior?
Well, because he was a millionaire, he was the king now. Yeah. That's real important.
She's never said anything bad about him?
Oh no, they really worship him now because they got rid of Kate and he became rich and successful because they got rid of Kate. And that was all I ever heard about her, is that she kept him back. Now look, it was true. Karen was right and Kate was holding him back, and then he got rich, and then the whole family fell apart, and David is, framed with the murder and suicide, and then she's dead. And it just all dawned on me as it all started happening to me now. I'm like, this is the exact same thing that was happening to her. And so just the dynamic of, not being, a label put on you, and then there's nothing that you can do to get it off. It's like if you're in a spider web and you can't ever get the web off, and then you're sucked dry. That's really how I would put what happened to her and to David then too.
Did you notice any difference with Timothy Crowley after he found out David died? When did your relationship with your sister and with Timothy start to really strain or change?
Well, they always have done that same thing. It's a toxic family system, so I'm a scapegoat. So I was always criticized like that and labeled, and nothing you do is right. I mean, they're the kind of people that would be like, you're a slut when you're 5 and you've never, you're a slut, you're a slut, you're a slut. That was my experience. So that's why I'm using that story. So, what was the question again?
Just what was your...
what was my relationship?
Yeah, when did your relationship start to change with them, and did you notice any difference with Timothy Crowley after?
I don't think it ever changed. I think they were doing that to me and are doing that, just like they were doing to Kate and David. And so it was just all, I didn't know it was out in the open. It's very devious. It's very dark. It's like sabotaging, and you don't realize it, but you're being butt kissed is how I would put it, is like you're not. Let me give you an example. Tim and I we had swimming pools, and I managed my own swimming pool, and he managed his family's swimming pool. And so he was helping me with the filter in our backyard one year, and we were back there just getting it cleaned up and stuff. And he just stops and he's like, because I think it was during COVID. Yeah, it was during COVID. And he's like, we decided in the family and at the court that if all hell breaks loose and there's no food and it's like the shit hits the fan, that we're going to vote that we're going to cannibalize you because you're such a loser.
What?
Yeah, that's what he told me. And, he would say things like that to me. Like he'd take our...
At the court.
Well, the court is like, it's like a group of friends that all live together, and they're like all friends and they live in the court. Yeah. So, it's like a family thing. So, and so I just kind of laughed but it was just so shocking that he would say that to me. But that really is how it works. It's like a preparation for preparing you that you're the bottom rung and there's no hope once that's determined. Kind of like Hunger Games or Survivor, that's why I feel that they're playing a game and it's blood sport, and that it's funny to them and it doesn't touch them at all. If you have ever read Psalm 73, it's a perfect example of how this operates. And Psalm 73 talks about people increasing no matter what, even when they disparage, or it never seems to penetrate them. They never are plagued or punished. COVID makes them richer. They never get sick, and so the innocent person is like, man, nothing ever goes right for the innocent, and I'm just doing all this in vain. And so he goes, it says, to the sanctuary, and he basically gets a more eternal perspective. And then he goes, I'm so sorry, I was a beast before you, but nevertheless, you guide me with your counsel, and I believe that you are eternal and that there is a judgment. And so he begins to recognize that it does catch up to them. But what I'm trying to say is that that's what they were doing to Kate. That's what they did to David after he died, and even before he died. And once you're the target and they're going to put you down, it's a game, and they're very successful. They're very successful at it. And so you get into a state of despair. And I think what we're watching is an institutional success, that has happened with the whole Herzog group, and whoever's at the root of all of that is really who needs to be focused on, because the goons and the Crowley men, Crowleys, I think that there's a bigger narrative. There's a bigger group that the reason that they could get away with, the weird things that they did, and they know it. So we deal with some real tough cases that we are dealing with right now. And when you have power behind you, you can mess up, and that the power is behind you, and that you'll never face a consequence. You can mess up. You can do whatever you want.
There was something that we had talked about a while ago about Tim Crowley having a USB of the gray state. Can you kind of go through that story a little bit?
Yeah. So I was staying there in May a couple years ago, and in the room
after David's death.
Yeah. So yeah, and it was like maybe 2 years ago in May, and I was staying in one of the rooms, and the only thing on his desk was the USB that said the gray state. And I thought that was really odd, because he didn't have any other papers, and that was the only room I was in. Now the computer was there. But one thing that I do think everybody needs to understand why this is confusing too about David, because I really do think there was some real grief. That there was grief that was shown, like by Danny Jr., by Dan, by Tim and Karen. They did seem like this was shocking to them. So, and then there was a lot of grief afterwards, I'm saying that they don't grieve, but it was hard for them not to. Like, they definitely showed grief, and because you're not allowed to grieve in this family, that was a very big deal. Like, so everybody felt so sorry for Danny Jr. because he had to go find them and clean the house and deal with the dog. So he became the hero, and everybody protects Danny Jr. because, and I never thought, like, why isn't Kate doing this? Never, not one time did it cross my mind that it was so inappropriate for him to be in there doing that for his brother when his mother was alive and not allowed to know him. That to me is one of the weirdest things now that I'm out of the darkness. I wasn't ever allowed to go into the case. We were terrified. My mother said something to my sister and said, this case is very, very suspicious. Karen got up and basically threatened my mother with rage, like, don't you go into that, that's a conspiracy, and he turned mad. And I mean, my mom was terrified. And I think for the kids, they would all say the same thing, and they couldn't grieve. And like, our son watched the documentary, and I never once talked to him about it. It's so dark for all the kids to talk about, because, think about it, that could be them.
Right.
And so Tim, with that USB and stuff, I think he was in shock. I really do. I don't think he had anything to do with it. I do not believe he did, just based upon him being in shock. And I think he was in grief and probably wanting to try to write it and stuff for everybody else. But, I don't know, because I'm not, they aren't that open with me, but I just happened to see that. And then, I think they'll be really hurt that I'm saying these things, but I think this is the thing. They aren't hurt. They don't care that they're saying these things about Kate. They don't care that they've said these things about David and Kamal and Rania. They don't care. So why should any of us care if we're questioning them? And
I don't care at all. I'll tell you straight up, I don't care at all. And it's like, David is innocent. He died first. And if they don't want to accept that, guess what? That means they have the problem. The truth is the truth.
That's right. Yeah. And so many other things are so weird. And so, if they want to just keep running with their little label, which I've seen them do, that is the way toxic families and institutions work. And so that's what we're seeing. And I hope that brings clarity for everybody. And so how do we do a justice go around? Like, obviously it's not going to come through the justice system. So what you're doing is already bazillion steps ahead. And that's what I'm finding for so many people in different cases where there is no justice. This is the only thing you can do. And it's very dangerous. It's a very important part, the truth teller whistleblower. And don't ever think that 3 views isn't a lot. It's seeds being sown and continued. And don't disparage the small beginnings and being a true truth teller. Because look at, you guys reached me. You reached me, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah, we know that Greg is being shadow banned. I mean, there are times when, I'll watch his videos live. I don't say anything. I'll be there watching, and I'll put a like. It doesn't move. It doesn't count me being there. So then I'll go and I'll pop up on a different account and go on there. Doesn't show anything. So then I just leave it run. I'm like, it'll be in the background. So, but it's ridiculous.
Yeah, because they're doing to you guys what they did to David and Kate and me. So they're saying you're losers and you're not to be listened to. And they've labeled you. And that's what you guys are walking out. But like, I saw some other random channel that does crime stuff, and they did his case, and he had a ton of views. It was allowed because it's not a consistent narrative. And for you guys to get the paperwork you've gotten, oh my gosh, that's huge. I was just thinking about that and preparing to talk to you guys. I'm like, oh my Lord. And to compile it into a book, and that is so massive. You guys are their worst nightmare.
Yeah, and we only had half of the stuff that we have now. When I finished the book in 2019, we didn't have a lot of the stuff. We didn't have the day one journal. We didn't have the blacklight reports. We didn't have a lot of that stuff. We had the whole DNA, and I thought the DNA was good enough for for anyone who really cares, who wants to keep some open mind. You can see right there in the DNA and medical examiner stuff.
Yeah,
and it's all right there. You